It's Andrew Shecktor, and the first book I wrote, the very first book I wrote, it's called Centralia PA Devils Fire. Now, people ask about the Devils. We'll talk about that later, perhaps, but the Devils is because there's more than one devil. That's why there's no punctuation, not a single devil. And people love this book for some reason. I go to the fair, Bloomsburg Fair. It's a great, if you're in the Berwick area, in the Bloomsburg area in September, every year we do an author's booth, and about 29 to 39 roughly authors come to that fair, and all are local authors. But that was the first place I started to sell it, and it just sold like crazy. I sold out for the first 3 years. The book is available on Amazon. It's available through your local bookstores, or pretty much any place you buy books. Story of the local fire that burned out the town of Centralia, and all the residents had to leave the town. And now the question is, why did it burn down, and when it could have been stopped? And local residents say the fire could have been stopped many times. In fact, they had a plan to put the fire out, and the Pennsylvania government wouldn't give them the funds. So they said they would do it themselves. They wouldn't let them. The Department of Mines of Pennsylvania said they couldn't do it because they had to be funded through the state. So thus the fire burned and burned the town out. Now there's nothing left but charred remnants. A lot of books and stories have been written about Centralia, and I decided to write it from a different perspective. Mine is a metaphorical view. It's actually a head trip. That's the interesting thing. As opposed to writing the history, which I really didn't want to do, I actually wrote about my head trip going back to the town. See, I used to live there. I used to live in Philadelphia. I used to go there all the time. Once the fire started, I worked for a company that was putting the sensors in that monitored the ground temperature. And it was still a thriving town at the time. Then I moved up to Berwick. So I moved actually from the Philadelphia area up to Berwick in 2005. And one day my son calls me up and says, "Hey, Dad, can we come by?" I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Well, we're going up to Centralia. We want to see the smoke." Well, there wasn't much smoke anymore. I said, "Well, yeah, no problem." I figured he'd come up afterwards since Centralia was on the way. No, he knocks on the door, 9:30 in the morning. I'm not even dressed, and I haven't had my first cup of coffee. And he says, "Dad, you ready to go?" "Go where?" "Centralia." Oh, God. Well, my last daughter was still living with me, and she was in her teens, late teens, and she says, "Let's go, Dad, come on, let's go." Well, we packed our equipment up, camera equipment and everything, headed off to Centralia, got down to, where the heck is the town? There's nothing here. There's phone poles, there's streets, there's no houses, there's no nothing. It's like aliens picked this up. Well, I got this head trip, like wow, this is just so strange. It was like a UFO came down and just took the whole town up. So the book basically is a story of this head trip, of coming down and seeing this whole town gone. The whole way home, I had these visions of writing this book, because it's just I said I could tell the story of Centralia, but tell it metaphorically, like you're in a dream, like you're in the Wizard of Oz, or something like that, where it's that kind of that head trip where all these characters represent other characters in real life. Hence the book. And that was how the book came about, basically. It's the first book I actually wrote, pretty much straight on, writing every single night for almost a year, and then proofreading after that. And it came out actually in 2014, still one of the top sellers. Nobody really knows how it got started, and that's what part of the controversy of the whole thing. They're saying that they were cleaning up for Memorial Day. Every Memorial Day, they would have this big parade and everything. They'd clean the town up, and they'd start the fires, and the firemen would come out and they'd burn all the trash and garbage and everything. And they think that caught a coal seam on fire. But it doesn't quite fit the bill. It's like there was something else, maybe. There was another fire that was burning as well that could have started it. And then there's a story that maybe this 1932 Bast coal mine fire had spread and caught coincidentally, because that was in the same area, and that these things burned for years and years, and that it just caught. So nobody really knows exactly, but they're putting their money on this Memorial Day fire that they burned. Not too sure if that's what really happened or not.
And that fire is still raging beneath the ground today, right?
Right, it's way deep underground now, and it's still burning. It could either burn itself out or change course, because what's happening is it's following a coal seam that's going to hit the river. pretty soon there's a creek that goes through there it's got to go way below that, and the mine there's no more coal. The chance could go towards Ashland, but at this point it looks like it's going to maybe burn itself out, but it still could go another 50, 100 years. But my mom, and she was a writer. She was the associate editor of a magazine called Holiday Magazine, one of the very popular elite magazines of the day. And she taught a class later in life. She taught a class at a local high school, and the class was creative writing. Now, I was a young kid at the time, so I went with her. She took me along with us, and I'd sit and listen to her lectures. And then my dad passed away very suddenly. He died very young, and I accompanied her and helped her set projectors up and other things that helped her with the class. So I said, that's pretty cool. Didn't think much about it, but I started writing articles for magazines. I did a lot, like more recently in the Reader's Digest magazine. I was interviewed, and they put a piece in on Christmas miracles, and they actually wrote that up for me. But over the years, I've done a lot of articles in different magazines. I actually had I published for about 3 years. I published a magazine called, what did I even call that magazine? Electronic Weaponry, or it was a thing about electromagnetic and electric weapons. And it was actually a pretty good seller at the time. There were a lot of subscriptions for about 3 years. Printed it on a old mimeograph machine. Now I'm showing my age here, but it was really pretty cool. Over the years, then I said, I did a lot of this kind of one-offs. I did a story on a survival. I took my kid out on a lake down in Montgomery County, and that storm brewed up. We were in the middle of this lake about a mile across. We were right in the middle of this thing in a inflatable kayak, and over the mountain, this storm just came out of nowhere. And they're shouting, "Get off the lake! Get off the lake!" I'm trying my best. I'm really trying. And this kayak's going around in circles, and the lightning's hitting the lake and everything. Well, I wrote the story for the Survival magazine, and it went off real big with that. So this is the kind of thing I did for many, many years. I never thought of really writing a book. My mom was I call her a sort of a writer. She was good with doing the research and everything. She never wrote a book on her own. This is one of the books she wrote, one of 2 books. And she wrote it with her associate, Harriet Savitz, who was one of her students, actually. And it was a dud until it ended up on when Apollo 11 was going to the moon. They came up, and it was Walter Cronkite, of all people. He says, "Well, there's a lot of books out there on the moon about the moon. For instance, this one that just came out, The Moon is Mine by Maria Caporale, Shecktor, and Harriet Savitz." And of course, now the book sold like nuts for the next year, practically. So finally, self-publication came in. I said, you know what? I want to write about something I want to read about. And I don't care if anybody reads it or not. I just don't care. I'm going to write it so well that I will enjoy it, and I can read it over and over again. And I want to write something different, which is why the book Centralia comes up. You either love this book or you hate it. And I'm going to be honest with you, because if you're looking for a history book, that's not the book for you. It's not a history book. But you can learn all of the history. Not only can you learn the history, but when I write about my life. So every book will tell the story of me. It'll tell about my personal feelings, my philosophies, my religion, my beliefs. You could tell everything about me by reading Centralia PA Devils Fire, or one of my other books, because that's the story of my life, and all intermixed. Plus, I mixed in the actual history. So while the actual things may not have happened, maybe there weren't, the priests weren't out in Centralia doing, the rites, and maybe all these other people weren't out there doing the witches weren't out there trying to save the town. But you can relate that the witches are the people trying to save the town, the priests are the town authorities who are trying to save the town, and each one, the coal miners are in there, the evil coal miners are Satan. So it's all how you perceive the book. So if you've got a brain and you use your brain and your noggin, you really enjoy it because it's a fun tale, plus it tells a story. But I like telling it in a different manner. So I wanted to tell it, and the other thing I wanted to do is make it so it's believable. So when you read the book, everything in there it goes from the time that the town was the priest had said that he had cursed the town. He said the town's nothing will be left but the church. It's gonna be gone, basically. And from that time up until the fire. I don't talk about the fire. I don't talk about after the fire. I talk about right up to the fire. Maybe the fire. There was a real witch that actually lived in town. She was, I don't know exactly what she was. I call her the old witch, but she did the horoscopes for the local paper and some other things. And she had a little shop where she had the trinkets like the little witch shops have these days. Mm-hmm. Very crazy character. I modeled her after a Ukrainian friend of mine who did tarot cards. And she was a crazy character. Her cards were so accurate, it was crazy. But, she was a real witch that was in there. But a story of the witches, that's fictitious, but it represents the townspeople, basically.
So let's talk about that. I remember when we spoke privately, you said that even if I check the weather for that book, it'll be accurate. How much of that is accurate and how much is it fictitious?
So everything that you can check in this book is 100% accurate. So if you go and you look at the timetables for the train that came in that actually ran through Mount Carmel, I had to get them to Centralia, but the train didn't run to Centralia. You had to go by stage from Mount Carmel to Centralia. All this involved research. This is a significant amount of research to write a book like the way I wanted to write it. But I wanted you to be able to go back and look up all the historical characters, all of the people that are spoken of in the book, any of the situations, the temperature, the rain, even the little things are the real gotchas. This is what took me so long to write. Every time I wrote a sentence, I'd have to research it, because you look at it, Memorial Day, we'd think it's Monday, right? But no, it wasn't always Monday. And back in 1962, it wasn't Monday. It happens on a Tuesday. It was all different days. But if I had put Monday down, I would look like a total amateur. But everything in there is, you can research anything in there. The coal miners, the car they were driving, the features on the cars they were driving, every bit of here, the color of the shirts they wore, everything that's in this book you can find and research either some of it's online, some you have to actually go and do some legwork because it's not even online.
You touched on it earlier, but talk a little bit more about the inception of this book. Where did the idea come from? Why did you even want to write a book about Centralia?
Well, the whole thought of writing a book, I couldn't think of a topic to write on, and in fact, I was at the time I was started. Let's jump back to my little booklet here. This is for all you budding authors and people that might want to write. You can see all these little notes that I take in this little book here. This is my book ideas from 2014 through 2020. 2014 was Centralia. So I figured, what's my next book going to be? And I just started writing. I wanted to write about something that I knew, understood 100%, and that I could put my life and my heart and soul into, something I really appreciated. And I write these notes down. That was one of the things in my notes that I wrote down. But that's, what am I going to write about, basically? And if you ever want to do it, keep a book ideas, things that you might find interesting. That's what I did, basically. And now what happened was, like I said, that one day, we went down to Centralia and the town was gone. And I said, and my head just went, it just went, wow, where'd the town go? I mean, literally, it was there, now it's not there, it's gone. So, and the streets are there, the phone poles are there. It's like something out of Roswell.
So you visited that place like right after the fire? No?
Yeah, well, I was there during the fire. Then I left, and then, like I said, I moved to Berwick. I never thought to go. I actually drove past there to go to Ashland, to the coal mine. Never thought that I was driving through what was Centralia. Until my son decided to go back down there, a number of years after we'd been living in Berwick. I'm like, holy crap, where'd the town go?
So people were just flooding it? Because I know there's still 1 or 2 residents, right?
There's like 7 left. 7?
And I know, so the people left immediately after the fire? Or did they have to just
fire
slowly
burned?
trickle out?
Yeah, well, they were bought out by the state at one point. People started to leave. There were some areas that were hotter than others.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't live there. Coddington was one of he had a gas station. We used to go there all the time. That's another interesting thing. We used to go there when I went hunting with my dad, and my dad worked for the city of Philadelphia for Ed Bacon. And oddly enough, guess who we went up there? We went hunting with Ed and Kevin Bacon and a bunch of other people of notoriety from the Philadelphia area. It's pretty cool. But we went right through Centralia because there was no northeast extension of the turnpike yet. So we would stop at Coddington's. We would go through town, and it was a thriving town at the time, even though the fire was burning underground. But it got so out of control that whole one part of that town, just got too hot to live in, and the state bought everybody out basically.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that. When the town was actually functioning, it was a very thriving town.
Right.
Well, I know you have, you're a busy guy, busy schedule. Talk to me a little bit about your writing routine. What I mean by that is, do you write at night? Do you write when you wake up in the morning and your brain is fresh? Do you have to stay home to write? You know, I've talked to authors who actually need people around when they write. What's your writing routine like?
Well, it all depends. Now, with my Centralia, I made it a point to every night I'd spend at least 2 hours just working on a chapter and working out what I did is I start out with chapters, and the chapter's going to tell a story, but I don't write the chapters. I write chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what that chapter is going to be about. Then I fill in the blanks. I start writing each chapter and making it relate to the other ones. But at least I know where the story starts and where it ends, because you've got to tell that whole story and have a reason for telling it. But then I make a routine of going like every night, working at least 2 to 4 hours, just writing when I'm working on a book. That's what I normally do. I lucked out, and I really can't tell the story, but I kind of lucked out at work at one point. It's a long story, but it's probably not for the public knowledge. But let's put it this way: I had some time on my hands, and I ended up being able to do a lot of writing when I worked on my other book. The one for Dark Water Game Over was the book I wrote. I needed to get that story told. I just lucked out. It's a long story that's for another time.
Well, you're a writer, so I mean, I guess wherever you can plop down and write, you write.
Right, exactly. If you have the opportunity,
maybe not during a hurricane or something, but you know.
If you have the opportunity and the time, that's the important thing. You fill it in.
So talk about the research that went into Centralia.
Oh my God, Centralia! It's unbelievable. I mean, there's more research in Centralia than any of my other books. And it started out because I needed to put the pieces together. So I started meeting with the townsfolk down in Centralia, because there's not a lot of information on it, a lot of history. A lot of the newspapers are gone. You can't find them. A lot of it was done right here in the Berwick. In Berwick Library that we're in today. In the back, there's a little place where they have all the old stuff that nobody ever looks at that's put in there. And you have to go in there and dig through it, and have the old magazines and newspapers and books and whatnot. And then down in historical societies down in Ashland, and talking to people down in Wilburton. There are a lot of that in the area down in Wilburton 1, Wilburton 2. A lot of the folks down there know it. They don't want to talk about it much. That's the real problem. Now, I got involved with a fellow too that did a film recently, and I was actually in the film. And I won't get into that right now, but he did a film. He actually wanted to come down and have me kind of walk him around and show him Centralia, and we did that too. So I got to meet a lot of people during that too. But the people don't like to talk about it. They want Centralia to go away. They don't want it to be publicized. They'd rather just die its own death and forget about it, which is kind of sad, because it's a tale that needs to be told. And it shouldn't. For all the people that had to leave and all the hardships, that shouldn't be lost. That story, in my opinion.
So talk about some of the characters. It had to have been difficult and fun to write fictional characters, but also their real characters.
Right.
So talk about some of the challenges with writing those characters and making them authentic or fictionalized wherever need be.
Well, you have to learn about the characters. Every character mentioned. This is a fictional. I call it historical fiction, but it's a metaphorical fiction. Every character in this book is a real character. There's no made-up characters, and I had to learn who they were and how they acted by historical records and by anecdotal, especially the more recent characters. There's a fellow, I can't remember his name now. It's in a book. But he actually drove he was one of the municipal workers. He drove one of the big heavy machinery things, the bulldozers or whatever. And I met with him and talked with him, and he never expected to be in the book, but I actually met him again at the Bloomsburg Fair, and I said, you're on page 172. But all the historical characters, I had to learn not just the character, but what it was like in those days and in those times. And a lot of it, as you get older, the older you get, if you go out and you experience the world, a writer needs to experience the world. You can't just be passive. An aspiring writer should create, should visualize, should dream, should explore. If you want to write, think about what you want to write about, whether it's fictional or non-fictional, and start learning about that. Think about it and see if it's something you might want to actually write. Because a lot of times you'll find something you think is a great topic is a dead end. So learn about it first. Find out what the interesting takes are on it. And what you want to do is take notes. I always carry a notebook. Take notes, write down what's really cool, what's different about it, and then start writing down what you found out about that topic, regardless of what it is. If you want to write, a fictional story, and it's about a futuristic thing, well, talk to somebody down in the Space Center, in Kennedy Space Center. Learn about where we're at now and where technology is in the future. Yeah, and with all the tools we have now, there's so many people you can talk to, so many forums out there that you can listen and talk to other people that are talking about that type of topic. Is it inner space travel possible? Are time warps? Because you don't want to sound stupid.
How has the response been for Centralia?
Centralia is insane. Centralia is crazy. I had so many people.
Like it? You said they either love it
so
or they hate it.
You love it or you hate it, but they all buy it. Every one of them buys it. And in general, the other authors I like are people like Asimov. I love science fiction. So like Asimov's been one of my big people that I follow and authors that I like, and Stephen King. I like Stephen King, and there are a few others that kind of steered me on the path I'm on. Challenges writing the book. The biggest challenge was research. Research and more research, because I wanted it to be precise. I wanted it to be accurate to a T. And finding that research, and so you can't find it all on Google, and it's not, you can find a lot on there, but you can't find it all. One of the things I'm writing about, because I've done a lot of interesting things, not just the Tesla coils, but I built an X-ray machine that actually works, but all kinds of stuff. So one of the books I want to write is the title I have tentatively is called The Alchemist, Modern Day Magician. And it's about people that are trying to do things that are mysterious and inspire awe, and things that nobody else wants to touch because they're dangerous and that sort of thing. And it's also going to have that political influx of what I ran into trying to get parts and trying to get information on things to do this. So it's going to be a kind of political in nature too. And look for my future books. I have a couple other books out. If you don't mind me, I'll just say that one of the things that my latest book is called Dark Water Game Over. Definitely worthwhile. We'll have to do an interview on that sometime. But Dark Water Game Over is a story about a whistleblower from Bulgaria who basically told the whole story about where we are today. He has the whole thing about the pandemic and everything else, and the financial situation. And it's a very scary story. I followed this guy. Again, a true story written in fictional format. That's my latest work. Hope you take a look for that too.